Okay, good afternoon. In a short while, I will be joined by World Food Programme Palestine Representative Antoine Renaud. He will join us from Gaza City to brief on the situation there. And speaking of Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that UN agencies and more than 200 international and local non-governmental organizations issued a statement yesterday urging the international community to take immediate and concrete actions to press the Israeli authorities to lift all impediments to NGO operations and humanitarian access across the Occupied Palestinian Territory, especially in the Gaza Strip. They warned that restrictive policies, including a new registration system for international NGOs that relies on vague and politicized criteria, are undermining relief efforts and risk the collapse of the humanitarian response. They also stressed that many essential supplies, such as food, medicine, hygiene items, and shelter materials, remain stuck outside Gaza, and that dozens of international NGOs face deregistration and forced closure by year's end. The loss of NGO capacity would severely disrupt life-saving services, including healthcare, nutrition treatment, water and sanitation, and emergency shelter, at a time when needs are acute and alternatives cannot fill the gap. The UN and our partners continue our efforts to scale up assistance across the Gaza Strip, despite these challenges, with a focus on providing winter support to mitigate the impact of harsh weather conditions. Our partners say that since the ceasefire came into effect in mid-October, and as of Tuesday, they have distributed multi-purpose cash assistance to nearly 139,000 households, compared with over 40,000 in September. Each household received digital payments equivalent to about $378. Altogether, more than 305,000 households in the Gaza Strip have received at least one payment this year. Our partners providing education services report that on Tuesday, they distributed hygiene materials to more than 90 temporary learning spaces across the Strip, benefiting nearly 115,000 school-aged children. These supplies are particularly critical during the winter rainy season, as they improve sanitation conditions and reduce health risks in overcrowded spaces. Also on Tuesday, 3 new temporary learning spaces were established in northern Gaza, 2 in Gaza City and 1 in North Gaza Governorate, bringing the total number of operational learning spaces across the Strip to more than 400. Several multi-purpose tents were also installed to foster safer learning environments for enrolled students, many of whom are receiving education for the first time. Finally, our health partners report that constraints affecting the entry into Gaza of emergency medical teams have eased somewhat in recent weeks. Denial rates have fallen to about 20%, compared with 30 to 35% before the ceasefire. There are currently more than 340 emergency medical team staff in Gaza. The General Assembly this morning observed the 65th anniversary of the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, and it also observed the International Day Against Colonialism in all its forms and manifestations. The Secretary General, in remarks delivered by Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support Elizabeth Spahar, said that the United Nations helped more than 60 territories, home to over 80 million people, pursue self-determination and emerge as independent states. But he added that the legacy is unfinished, with 17 non-self-governing territories remaining. And he added that the Security Council, the international financial system, and other pillars of global governance bear the imprint of a world that no longer exists, a world of empires, not of equals. He said that we must end colonialism in its traditional forms and dismantle its remnants wherever they endure. This morning, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs Rosemary DiCarlo briefed the Security Council members on the situation in Syria. She said that Syria has made significant progress over the past year, including restoring state institutions and enabling large-scale returns of refugees and internally displaced people. She warned, however, that the situation remains fragile. Ms. DiCarlo stressed that inclusive dialogue, security sector reform, and sustained international support are essential, and reaffirmed that the United Nations stands ready to support the Syrian people throughout this transition. For her part, Joyce Msuya, the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, told the Council members that Syria's transition from humanitarian aid to recovery and reconstruction will require broad partner support for government-led efforts. She added that supply routes are normalizing as cross-border operations wind down. But with the 2025 humanitarian appeal only 30% funded, millions remain without help, forcing reductions, disruptions, and difficult prioritization decisions, while needs will remain immense next year. Turning to Sudan, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights today called for an impartial, thorough, and effective investigation into the attack on the Zamzam internally displaced persons camp in April. According to a report published today, at least 1,013 civilians were killed during the offensive from the 11th to the 13th of April, in what the report describes as a consistent pattern of serious violations of international humanitarian law and gross abuses of international human rights law. The report details widespread killings, rape, and other forms of sexual violence, torture, and abductions committed during the three-day offensive by the Rapid Support Forces on the Zamzam camp. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said those responsible for serious violations of international law must be held accountable through fair proceedings. Meanwhile, we and our partners in Tawala continue to support people displaced from the state capital, El Fasher, and surrounding areas, as well as the Zamzam displacement camp, but needs remain overwhelming, resources scarce, and insecurity continues to hamper the response. Across the Kordofan region, our humanitarian colleagues tell us they are deeply concerned by reports of escalating drone attacks and shelling that continue to harm civilians and drive new displacement. In South Kordofan state, multiple drone strikes and shelling have reportedly hit civilian areas in recent days, including the town of Dilling and the state capital, Kadugli. The violence has forced families to flee Dilling on foot towards Kadugli, along routes where landmines and other dangers have been reported. The journey is especially perilous for the most vulnerable, including children, pregnant and lactating women, and older people. More than 50,000 people have been displaced since late October from locations across the Kordofan region due to heightened insecurity, according to the International Organization for Migration. In South Kordofan, our partners report that more than 1,900 people have arrived in the locality of Abu Jubeha in the past 3 days. They're now sheltering in temporary settlements and urgently need food, nutrition, safe drinking water, health services, and protection, at a time when humanitarian assistance remains severely overstretched and access is limited. In North Darfur State, local sources report that drone strikes in recent days caused civilian casualties and displacement in the localities of Kutum, Melit, Umbaro, Tina, and Saraf Umra. The impact of drone attacks is also being felt beyond frontline areas in Sudan. In the early hours of today, drone strikes on power stations in Adbara in River Nile State triggered widespread blackouts, disrupting electricity supplies across multiple towns. With just a couple of weeks left in the year, Sudan's humanitarian response plan is only 36% funded, with $1.5 billion received out of the $4.2 billion required. We urgently call on donors to step up support to close the funding gap and sustain life-saving assistance. Turning to Haiti, this morning in Port-au-Prince, the humanitarian coordinator Nicole Kouassi launched the Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan for 2026. The plan seeks $880 million to support 4.2 million vulnerable Haitians out of 6.4 million people who need aid and are bearing the brunt of violence at the hands of armed groups. Internal displacement triggered by armed violence has doubled in a year. In September 2025, nearly 1.4 million people were internally displaced, representing 12% of Haiti's total population. Widespread insecurity in the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince and its gradual spread to regional zones have caused displacement, stifled Haiti's economy, and limited people's access to food. Some 5.7 million people, which is half of Haiti's population, are currently going hungry every day. The number is expected to increase to 5.9 million people during the lean season that runs from March to June. The impact of armed violence on women and girls has been devastating. Our partners have recorded an average of 27 new cases of gender-based violence per day between January and September 2025. More than half of those are cases of sexual violence. Worse still, collective rapes account for 2/3 of reported cases of sexual violence. Ms. Kouassi underlined that despite the immense scale of the needs, the $908 million Haiti humanitarian appeal for this year is only 23% funded, with $206 million mobilized. She calls for renewed, substantial, and sustained international support. We informed you yesterday about the Secretary General's phone call from Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, regarding the current tensions in the region. During the call, the Secretary General reaffirmed the United Nations position on the need for member states to respect international law, particularly the United Nations Charter, exercise restraint, and de-escalate tensions to preserve regional stability. The United Nations and the government of Ukraine held their second annual aviation talks yesterday. The meeting took place virtually. The two parties highlighted the strong cooperation between the United Nations and Ukraine-registered civil aviation service providers in implementing UN mandates. Discussions covered regulatory oversight, aviation safety, and future outlooks for UN aviation activities. The meeting reinforced the technical working relationship between respective aviation specialists, aiming to further enhance the quality and safety of air transportation services for the UN. Both parties agreed to continue this dialogue on a regular basis. Today is International Migrants' Day. Since 2014, nearly 70,000 migrants have died or gone missing along land and sea routes. As borders tighten, smugglers and traffickers thrive, and women and children face the greatest risks. In his message, the Secretary General says migration drives progress and development, but when poorly governed, it fuels fear and puts lives at risk. He urges solidarity, safe pathways, and respect for migrants' rights. And today, we honored the Arabic language, a language of history, culture, and dialogue. On World Arabic Day, we say, may its words continue to connect people and build bridges across the world. Are there any questions for me before we turn to our guest? Yes, Namo.
Thank you, Farhan. Today, Secretary Rubio announced that the United States was sanctioning two more ICC judges for engaging in what he called politicized and illegitimate actions against Israel. Does the Secretary General have any comment on this?
What I can tell you is that the Secretary General expresses serious concern about the designation of 2 additional judges of the International Criminal Court to be sanctioned under the executive order, as well as the ongoing designation of other International Criminal Court and United Nations officials. While the UN and the International Criminal Court are separate institutions with separate and distinct mandates, the UN considers the ICC a key pillar of international criminal justice, and the Secretary General respects its work. The Secretary General also emphasizes the importance of the basic principle of judicial independence. The UN remains committed to cooperating with the ICC in accordance with the relationship agreement between the UN and the ICC, which was approved by the General Assembly in 2004.
One more question on the phone call with Maduro. How long did it last?
I don't have. We don't time the phone calls. It was a call received. It was a call from the president who had called to the Secretary General. Yes, please, Minlu.
Thank you, Farhan. The U.S. has approved a package of arms sales to Taiwan that is one of the biggest ever, that worth up to $11 billion. What is the UN's position on this decision?
We don't comment on arms sales as a matter of policy. Regarding Taiwan, of course, you're aware of the position we've taken on the One China policy and the relevant UN resolution from 1971. Okay, if that's it, then I will turn to our guest.